to the latest episode with Jessica Zeff and Elvan Baker. Lori's on hiatus during this episode, doing something probably not fun, but very important. So you're stuck with the two of us, and we're super excited. The episode is brought to you as usual by Simply Compliance. And what we're going to talk about today is the importance of written policies and procedures. Now, before you roll your eyes or write us off, it's actually a really great episode because here's what's going on. I don't know about those of you who are listening in, but Elvan and I were talking, and I've really noticed in my work, people asking me, well, two things are happening. Hey, Jessica, I wrote a compliance or privacy policy and procedure. Would you have a look at it and review it? Now, I get this policy and procedure, and it's clearly been written off of ChatGPT or some other AI model. And truth, the policy is pure garbage. Like, it makes no sense. It wouldn't stand up in court. It wouldn't withstand any kind of regulatory scrutiny. And at first I thought, okay, well, people are still, trying to figure out how to use AI and trying to leverage it. But I mean, I have to write those policies and procedures then from scratch. They make no sense. And they're certainly not applicable to the organization who provided me with those policies and procedures. The other thing, so I was happy to deal with that. That's okay. But something else that has started to happen is, I mean, those of you who know me, I am a consultant. Part of the job, right, is to write policies and procedures for a living. That comes with compliance territory, and that can be actually a really cool process. But something that I'm seeing more of is, hey, it seems to be taking you a while to write this policy and procedure. Can't you just press the button on ChatGPT and produce a policy and procedure? That particular conversation has started to get under my skin. And that was kind of the reasoning or the impetus behind this particular episode. Because no, I can't just go to ChatGPT and say, can you write me a compliance policy? Or can you write me, a non-retaliation policy or a fraud policy or a training policy? It doesn't know what to write. There are so many difficulties and challenges with that approach. And that's what Elvan and I would like to talk about. So when we're thinking of, these policies and procedures that we're drafting or amending or trying to pull together, actually, they do require some expertise and some thought, and we're going to tell you why that is. And I also want to point out that in the past, when before ChatGPT or any AI, think about the effort that would go in to writing a policy and procedure. And Elvan and I, again, will talk about that and why that's so important. But you think about days or even weeks that went in. So if you can use something like ChatGPT and it takes you an hour or 2 hours just to get the language down, you're still saving so much time and effort. Like, you can't get away from that. And that's one would argue, it's a good thing. But as we get into the specifics and we talk about policies and procedures and why you can't just pull them off in a heartbeat, we'll cover really why that is. So my first question then to you, Elvan, is it really important to have written policies and procedures? I mean, why do it?
Okay. First things I want to say is that a second ago you said it started to rub you off. Is that what you said? Is that the word?
It got under my skin.
It got under your skin. And I was going to say, and nobody gets under Jess's skin. I was going to be like, it's like one of those like Dirty Dancing, nobody puts baby in the corner moment.
Well, I started to feel like I was doing something wrong. I thought, is it me? Like,
no. All right. Let's reel back a little bit here. First things first, I want to make sure that the listeners, are aware of, we want to talk about why policies and procedures, written policies and procedures matter in compliance programs and overall in companies about anything. But we do want to touch on this AI part of it. And I also want to bring up a really good point about a company that shut their doors down that I read. And I want to touch on that at the end too. But why PMPs are so important, why are written PMPs so important in any compliance programs and overall in companies. First things first, they really establish clear expectations. When something is written word has a different impact than verbal conversations or verbal directives. They fleet. We say things sometimes without thinking, or even when we think thoughtfully and we deliver it the best way possible, we still, even if our way of delivering the message is optimal, we still have to depend on the listener's level of focus, retention, so on and so forth. To be able to take all of these variables out of the picture, we need things in writing. That's just the reality of our world, not just in compliance, but any kind of business anywhere. So it establishes clear expectations. So I think that's really important. When we write these policies and procedures, we watch the language, the tone, the style, we look at the audience we're delivering to, and again, it gives us the ability to optimize the message. It also it supports a legal and regulatory compliance where the research has been done and we know for a fact that what is written complies with the laws and regulations. So nobody has to, there is no, while people can verbally or people among themselves debate the validity of it, we know that it fits the framework of law, HR law, regulation, FDA, whatever you're abiding by. So it also comes with that. It takes away this, but I think this, I heard this, takes that away. It's written, the research has been done, it complies with everything that we expect. It creates consistency. Consistency is everything. If when we want to accomplish a delivery of a valuable compliance program, if you're not consistent, if things are not standard, again, you leave it up to those, but there's an exception to rule to everything conversation. That's where things start falling in between the cracks, right? We don't want that as compliance professionals.
Small segue though, Elvan.
Hmm.
Do you think though policies and procedures, they're just there for compliance purposes?
Oh no. Policy and procedures are there. One of the biggest things that they accomplish, in my opinion, is operational efficiency. If people know what is expected of them, how it's expected of them, when it's expected of them, and the behaviors to support those expectations, they tend to get it done better, faster, and just more efficiently. Just again, it creates that operational efficiency, right? And when we say operational efficiency, all the companies are like, tell me more about it. Because it
Yeah.
all speaks to the productivity of their labor force. So, you really cannot beat the value of policy and procedures from the get-go. And I seem to see that maybe this is your experience, Jessica. On for your work, you focus on different sizes of companies. It seems like people think that, oh, we'll get there. No, you write the policy and procedure when you're itty bitty so that you can scale later. You don't write it when after 100 people went through your doors and 89 out of 100 made a mistake on something because it could have been written when you were only 5 of you.
Or they're all going in different directions. I mean, part of it is I see policies and procedures as part of your basic risk management.
100%.
Going back to what you're saying, having these written policies and procedures, they support consistency across the organization. They set expectations. They also can help things, help the business or the organization from going in directions it didn't intend to go. If you look at things like disciplinary procedures, or if you think about issues around equity and people coming forward to say, well, hold on, maybe someone's being treated differently than me for whatever reason or another, and it does happen, or I'm being bullied or whatever, harassed. Well, having these written policies and procedures, like it sets a standard. And you said that yourself.
It prevents also this general, how sometimes things happen where a regulatory body or a governing body will ask a employee, well, why did you do this? And they're like, well, my boss told me so. Okay. your boss is only one person, or that's what everybody does, or that's what I heard we do in this company. When you have a policy and procedure that's written, now you don't have to take the liability onto yourself as a company as if you have a company-wide problem, because you already wrote that that is not an approved method of doing something. So now the responsibility, you take that liability and risk from your shoulders and put it way back where it belongs, unfortunately, to the wrongdoer's shoulders. That's how I feel.
Yeah, and it supports the safety, and if you're in direct care, it supports the safety of the care that you're providing. It protects the organization and also employees. Again, because there's a written standard. I love that. And just a little tip, and I don't know that this isn't necessarily the reason to have written policies and procedures. I get that. But any organization, any regulator that's coming in to do an investigation or to do an audit, first thing they ask for are your written policies and procedures. First thing out the door.
Yeah.
That's what
Your
they ask
handbook,
for.
your PMP, your SOPs, and they're going to say, show me where.
Yeah.
That's it.
They ask for them. They want to know how staff access them, how they get trained on the policies and procedures. Now, like I said, I know that's not enough of an incentive, right? For a lot of organizations to have these written policies and procedures, but just keep that in mind. But Elvan, I'd come back to you and I'd say I'd play devil's advocate, going to how we kicked off this particular episode. Well, how come AI can't do all of that? If I was playing devil's advocate, like, surely AI knows everything. Like, it has access to all of this information. I'm being very sarcastic, people. So, for the purposes of the conversation, like, why can't I just press the button?
There are amazing benefits of using AI products, especially language learning models, LLMs, that we call them, ChatGPT being one of them. Amazing benefits. If you can produce drafts, I'm using the word draft, not a final product. You can create drafts quickly. You can change the tone. You can be the editor of a created item. Okay. But okay, that's the benefit of it. You can create consistent documents. You can say, hey, here's my PNP. Can you create an SOP out of this? Or can you create a checklist out of this? Can you create an onboarding week 2? Like, just be very specific. But again, you have the control of it. Those are the amazing benefits of using LLMs, AIs, ChatGPTs for that. You can improve the clarity or readability of something when you're unsure of your own writing skills, right? Because, example from me, this is my third language. There are times where things make sense to me in my head, and I recognize after almost 2 decades in the workforce that it is not as clear to the person who's reading it, even though it's clear to me. It's okay. Nothing is wrong with that. I can put the draft into the LLM and say, is this readable for X level of education? These are the benefits of using LLMs. If you want to scan through research and do a comparison, again, you are the editor. You are in control, not for a draft, not a final product. But there are dangers to it. You want me to go into it? I'm ready.
Yeah, let's chat. Let's talk. I mean, that's the crux of the issue, right? It is a
LLMs,
tool.
it's a
It's not.
machine. It's
Yeah.
it's a tool. It's a machine. Please, everybody, what is ChatGPT? What are these AI machines? It's called an LLM, language learning machine. Emphasis is on the machine. Now, I want everybody to close their eyes and think about all the machines they have in their lives and how badly they broke down within the last month. It's going to break down. It's going to be inconsistent. It's going to fail you. That's why we need a human to write the final product on everything that's going to control human behavior, that's going to engage dynamically with human behavior. We need a human to do that. Assistance is great. not the final product, right? It's like my robot cleaner. His name is Carl.
Ah!
I highly value Carl.
Oh my
Love
goodness.
Carl. But Carl misses the same corner after I taught Carl that same corner every single time. It's okay. Again, it's a machine. I know it's a silly example, but it's not going to replace the human intervention that's needed and necessary to produce the right quality of work and policy and procedure. Is that what you were thinking? I'm thinking we're on the exact same page on this one.
Yeah. No, when we were prepping, Elvan had this great idea about an LLM not being able to reflect the human aspects that are needed, that you need to account for when you develop a policy and procedure. My issue is that you have an LLM, right? It's got so much information, some of it garbage, some of it accurate, across so many different industries, right? And it can produce if you ask it to and say, can you give me a training policy and procedure, compliance training, it'll knock one out. It might be complete rubbish. It might have nothing at all to do with your organization. It might not define the terms that you need to have defined. It might write the policy and procedure in a way that no one's ever going to understand it. Right? It cannot possibly know. You can, there's a degree to which you can give the LLM an instruction, right?
Correct.
But at the end of the day, that LLM cannot replace the human element that Elvan is talking about and the expertise involved. It cannot possibly know the organization, and it cannot tailor a policy and procedure to specific situations or specific organizations to make it work.
Another part of it, I know you are 100% correct. And another part of it, I'm hoping that, I'm hoping that quite a few of our listeners are compliance professionals or people who are deeply involved or interested in the subject. Recently, I did another podcast and the host asked me how I got to where I got to. And I said, the simplest answer is to learn to do the work, you have to do the work.
That's right.
There is no replacement for it. So if as a professional in your growth spectrum, and we're always learning and growing as compliance professionals, that should be a part of your DNA and personal desire. If you're only using policies and procedures that have been popped out by LLMs, by other AI machines, how will you speak the value of it intelligently and apply it to the cases in front of you? You will not be able to do that. Why? Because you didn't write it. Why didn't you write it? Because you took the shortcut. Well, then how will you take this information, apply? What are you going to do to people? Read the policy and procedure, and the person, but I look at section 2A and it kind of applies to this situation. No, read 2A. Is that what you're going to do? You can't do that, right? Because you didn't write it. And it kind of applies, doesn't apply. To be able to, again, the only way to put the value out there is to acquire the value yourself first. And that goes through this painstaking activity that Jess has to partake in as a part of her job, and sometimes as a part of my job is to write it down.
You do. And I mean, the value is the expertise. The value is not the LLM. The LLM can produce any old rubbish. It can do some good work, but the value is the expertise. So you have to be able to, if you want to leverage the LLM to support your compliance work, specifically policies and procedures, you already have to know what you're looking for and what you want to be in the policy. And you've got to tell that LLM, I want you to talk about blah, blah, blah. I want you to structure the policy to be in such and such a way. I want you to include definitions. I want you to include references. You've got to be able to identify when that policy actually is factually incorrect, whether that policy is written in a way other people are going to understand it, whether it's actually written for the type of organization that you're working for and that you're working with. there's also an element of you got to check the references. Are those actually correct? AI will make things up. It will make things up. And you've got to have the experience to look at the policy. And also, you have to understand, does this policy and procedure, not only does it reflect the organization I'm working for and the values and the way we operate, does it actually meet regulatory requirements? Or is this a piece of garbage? It looks nice, but it doesn't actually meet anything.
Again, to be able to use it correctly, you have to have a certain amount of base knowledge that directs the LLM in the right direction. Again, easy answer, like, easy example, not an answer. But if to be able to say, draft me a template on X policy and procedure utilizing CMS chapter 15, based on Healthcare Compliance Association 7 elements, you got to know this. To be able to know that, you already have certain amount of built expertise. So again, it's a great place to start. I've always said this, I'm a big proponent of it. Right place and the right time, like most everything in life, everything in moderation, along with my chocolate in life. It's the LLMs. It's a learning machine. Hasn't learned it yet. It's not there yet, much like I'm not, but it definitely is not there yet. It's a perfect tool for drafting, brainstorming, pulling certain research. Like, just, you got to be very specific. Certainly not a final decision making machine. Absolutely not. It's actually quite dangerous. It's quite dangerous.
And I did have a client who said to me, we were talking about this thing, and I really invested my time in developing their policies and procedures and tailoring them. And he asked me, he said, aren't you using an LLM? And I said, well, yeah, I am. So think, it might have taken me, you asked me to develop a suite of 20 policies and procedures for you that we worked out. In the past, that might have taken me months. So the fact that, it's taken me a week or 2 weeks, but they're thoughtful. Of course, I'm using an LLM. And he said, oh, well, the information must not be there. But, the LLMs are getting better. And here's me thinking to myself, his implication was that at some point, we'll just be able to pull these things off. And I wasn't going to argue with him. But my view of it was, when we do need to have that conversation, he and I will have the conversation. Maybe he'll listen to the podcast. You never know.
When you're going to have that conversation is when something fails and there's an investigation, and that's when you're going to end up having the conversation.
Well, at the moment, we're able to say, and I'm able to have the kind of conversation that we're having at the moment. If I get to a client that says, hey, we're just going to use these policies and procedures that we pulled off of an LLM, I will back out because I don't want that professional responsibility. If they're not going to listen to me and they insist on using what is probably inappropriate, I cannot work with that. That's not safe. And speaking of safety, when we were prepping, and you mentioned this earlier in the podcast, we talked about reading about a practice that had decided to either suspend services or stop services. And when you get a chance, do you mind sending me, if you can find that article?
I'm more than happy to. So recently I read, I read a post. I'm involved with a lot of different groups on a very popular professional social media platform where I read a lot of posts. Recently, I read a post regarding a startup that was in the mental health space, and they were using AI and LLMs as a part of their algorithm, part of their decision making. And they have realized that even after having raised a sufficient amount of funds from investors, that the direction that the LLMs were taking, the decision making was dangerous, and they felt that the best course of action, one needs to applaud this gentleman, but instead of continue to grow and sell this company and never know whose hands this decision making would land on, they decided to shut down the operations because they said this is mental health. The decisions that this LLM is making is going to be dangerous. The intention was good and great at the beginning, but this is going to be detrimental to somebody's mental health, which we all know what those end results unfortunately may be. So they made the conscious decision to shut down the operations because their algorithm was pointing in the wrong direction. Because obviously a part of LLMs improving is that it builds its own knowledge base, and it uses that knowledge base to make future predictions and decisions. And it got to a point of what they felt was detriment, not help. So that's huge. That tells us how dangerous it can be to utilizing AI in human-based decisions.
Without having enough
Correct.
clinical or
Correct.
expert, you might not
Correct.
be clinical, but without having enough expert oversight and input.
And this happens all the time. This happens at my work all the time. Somebody who may not be very familiar with the therapy industry will look up something on one of the LLMs and say, well, this is what it says. Or I even get this from this is what Google Gemini is saying. I'm so happy that now I have Gemini in my life. I had Carl Geminis. I have them all. But yes, that's what it's saying in that moment. But I promise you that's not what's happening in the field. I like I said, I've been a therapist for almost 15 years. I know what's happening in the field. I'm married to one. I know what's happening. And you're not going to be able to get that from Gemini. And Gemini is not going to come and handhold you when you get audited and, clawbacks are coming your way. What are you going to tell the officials? Like Gemini said.
Well, that's the risk as
ChatGPT
well,
recommended.
right? Well, that's the other big risk. Like, first of all, you're talking from a patient safety perspective, which is horrible. I mean, that is super scary. And it's unnecessary if you used an LLM properly as a tool, but not the end all be all. But the other bit of it is that if you have a set of these beautifully written policies and procedures that have nothing at all to do with your organization and nobody knows nobody complies with them, no one follows them, it's going to come out in an audit. I mean, and that's maybe the best case scenario. Like, what if it's something that happens to a patient or a member, someone doesn't get the care that they need? Like, those are some of the worst case scenarios in the area that we work. But equally, you could lose a lot of money. And the impact of that in terms of an organization's reputation or the ability to continue to provide services to people who need them, like everyone loses. And the policies and the procedures are the foundation for that.
And this is where we go back into operational efficiency. They try to save money by not having the right person write these policies and procedures, the right person train the staff and all of that. Instead, they save the money, they used an LLM, it just popped it out in 2 seconds. And when the audit comes and when other problems come, they're going to incur costs. There's no way out of it. So again, something that I've learned from one of my mentors is he said, both in personal life and professional life, you either pay it now and pay it later. It's okay if you don't want to pay it now, but please know that when you pay it later, it's going to cost more.
I like his thinking. It's not, I mean, because it's true. I mean, the other thing we haven't talked about, and I'd like to work this through a little bit in the time that we have left, there's almost like an inherent assumption, and I don't think it was intentional, in the way that we've been talking about policies and procedures. Like, you can almost develop these on your own. And part of my fear is that when people are expecting you to press a button and the LLM spits out a policy and procedure, is that, number one, there are risks in doing that, but also you lose that component of taking the policy and the procedure to your constituents or your stakeholders. In the past, right? No compliance officer, nobody develops a policy and a procedure and just goes, hey, congratulations. That's not the way it should work. You should be running it by other stakeholders, other people, to say, how does this read? If I'm partnering with another team, let's say HR or information security, or if you're a clinical team or your risk management, I mean, you're partnering on these policies and procedures with other parts of the organization. How are you getting their feedback? How are you making sure that you're socializing the messages, you're having really thoughtful conversations about how things should work? How do you know? I mean, you're looking at this policy and procedure maybe from your perspective and the discipline you've been trained on, but of course you have policies and procedures that affect the whole organization or multiple departments. How are you getting that feedback? Number one, the LLM can't give it to you. It can't. In fact, you can't give it to you. You can't even tell the LLM to give it to you, even if it could, because you can't anticipate necessarily the challenges that another team might express and say, hey, have you considered this? Or,
Yes, it's perspective.
hey, we've got this Medicaid requirement
Absolutely.
or a TRICARE or
This is what
whatever it
happened
is.
3 months ago before you joined us.
Infection control or OSHA. It could be anything that, you weren't aware of. And so you didn't even know to draft anything around. And my fear is that in this idea of pressing a button amongst them is I'm afraid that, that conversation will get lost. And I feel that those conversations are critical to having policies and procedures that actually work and, help an organization manage their risk.
We go back to the same point. How are you going to get to the X work? By doing the work. Those conversations are necessary around the water cooler. Those conversations are necessary for you to grow within your role as a compliance professional. The only way for you to grow is to do the work, actually. So that, yet again, we're going back to the same point. You need other professionals' perspective to produce a enterprise-wide product, right? I'm compliant. I have a pretty good, I'm comfortable in healthcare compliance, especially in rehab and therapy compliance. Well, yes, but I am not an attorney. They may bring something else to my viewpoint that makes me go, oh, okay. Or I might need to talk to somebody from HR, just like you said, who's going to bring, again, we want to create a product that's going to be enterprise wide, that's going to be valuable, and it's going to be valuable and applicable from the ground level up and top down, both. And the only way to create that is a human doing it.
So, as we round out this episode, I'd like to leave it on a positive note because I actually
Look
think
at us.
despite what we've said and the concerns we've expressed, actually really like using LLM and having that extra support. And so I wonder, is there any advice that we can offer our listeners? Because what we're not saying is don't use an LLM. We use LLMs in our work. But the point is it's a tool. It's a piece of our work. It doesn't replace us or our expertise or the expertise of our colleagues. So what I would say is, number one, for those of us who are in positions to have to draft policies and procedures, have a think very carefully. You can't just go into an LLM and say, write me a disciplinary procedure. So I'd say step one, think about the policies and procedures that you need and where they're coming from. Are there regulatory requirements that apply? Are there accreditation requirements that apply? Are there contractual requirements that apply to these policies and procedures? And what are they? Sit down and identify those. Make sure you've got the knowledge and the expertise. And then maybe start to use the LLM to build a skeleton.
There you go.
And I
Draft.
very much a skeleton, not even a draft. We're not at the draft yet.
Yeah,
we go to the skeleton.
We're building a skeleton.
And then maybe have a look at that skeleton and start to identify. And this is where your expertise is absolutely critical. Okay, is this, what's missing from this? Does it? Did it get anything wrong? Is there enough information here? Have we had definitions? Are we clear about expectations? Is there too much information here? Do we need to break this down into multiple policies? Actually, do we need policies, procedures, and standard operating procedures. We didn't really get to talk about the differences there, but there is a difference. How does this come across? Who are your stakeholders? Like, who do you need to work with on this policy and procedure before you go too much beyond the skeleton? How much expertise from other disciplines are you going to need? Is it worth, telling the LLM, hey, build me something more in depth? Like, is it worth it, or is that information you're going to get from your colleagues? What references do you need? Make sure you're checking those references. And it's okay to say, hey, LLM, can you give me some references? That's fine. But keep in mind, they won't always know where to look. They won't know your contractual obligations. They won't know your accreditation requirements. And you know what else? If that information, like let's say their standard requirements for a particular certification or accreditation, the LLM might not have access to that information. If it's private or you have to pay for it and it can't scrape it off the web or from some other source, it won't have the information. So when you have the skeleton, you really need to know what you're going on about. So you need to think about that very carefully. And then think about, who are your partners? Who are your stakeholders? Who are your professionals that are going to give you the additional information you need to make this policy and procedure actually worth the effort? What else would you say, Elvan? What am I missing?
No, this is it. This is perfect. I mean, you use the word skeleton, I use the word draft, but it's all the same. AI, LLMs, they're there for drafting, brainstorming, initial research, some editing, not a final decision maker. We have to perform at every checkpoint of a document creation expert level of review with all the stakeholders, legal, HR, operational, clinical, whatever the organization needs. Whomever is going to touch needs to have an expert review. That's it. And then you can take it from there. Use it to your advantage, not to your demise. Much like everything in life, right? Use every machine to your advantage, not to your demise. If you use your cell phone to your advantage to find information and have the ability to call your loved ones, that's fantastic. But if you're stuck with it all day long and you're wasting your brain cells on it, it's to your demise. I think same thing. Everything in moderation, and know there's a right place and a time for it.
I'm going to put together an episode of Elvanisms, and that's one of them. But no, seriously, I mean, and think about the value. If you're thinking that policies and procedures are there just to look pretty, and you're there just to have something to maybe help you operationalize the work of your organization, but otherwise you're not thinking of your written policies and procedures in any other way. If that's the route you want to take, more power to you. That's fine. And I can't see how an organization gets away from this if you're employing people, if you're looking at safety, I can't see how you get away from regulatory requirements, legal requirements, risk management. Like, I don't know of any organization that can really pull this off. Just have written policies and procedures that look pretty, gather some dust, but they know they need to have something written, so they do. Like, I don't see how that works. But if you think that that's appropriate for your organization, more power to you. But consider, if you're, employing anybody, there are risks there, right? If you are working with patients or clients, or you're responsible for other people's well-being in some way, that's a huge risk to have policies either not have them or just have them as something that sits there and looks pretty. Like, that's the limit of your value. And I'd really encourage you to reconsider what these written policies and procedures are there to do. And by written, I don't mean necessarily in quill and ink. What I mean is, something that's documented and that staff can access. I know, quill and ink. I actually briefly considered maybe that was a skill I wanted to try just to see how people managed. And then I'm like, nah, that looks horrible.
See, that you can use LLM for that. Pop the document in there and say, make it look like this has been written to quill and ink. There you go. There's a use for it. Use it for stylistic formatting, stuff like that. use it for things that will save you time on matters of non-safety, non-operation, non-legal.
I'd like people to understand that your policies and procedures are there for more than just pieces of paper that you hand in once in a while because somebody asked for a copy. They're there for a reason. And hopefully those of you who are listening, truth is, Elvan and I really do find this idea of policies and procedures fascinating because it affects so much of our work. When we audit, when we do audits, or we're responding to audits, or when we're doing investigations, we really rely on written policies and procedures. And if they're not there, it presents complications in so many ways. And for people whose job it is to some extent to protect organizations and from risk, it can be really difficult when that foundational piece of your risk management, it's not just about compliance, but that foundational piece of your risk management isn't in place. And that's why we're so hot to trot, and we've dedicated a whole episode to the topic. I genuinely just don't think that some organizations, I don't think they really realize what's going on here with these policies and procedures. But hopefully we've been able to provide a little bit more insight as to what's going on, when and how you should use AI, and really a bit more perspective about how to get the best out of both your AI and your policies and procedures. What do you think, Elvan? Do you think we managed it?
I think we did it. Just think about this, everybody. Would you drive in a place or get in a bus or get in any transportation if you were told that there are no guardrails, there are no signs, there are no traffic rules? Would you ever get in transportation in that environment? If the answer is no, then you shouldn't operate without a policy and procedure. That's it. As simple as that.
That's another Elvanism. I'm telling you. I'm going to have a book. Get ready, people. Jason, our producer, is going to have his hands full. All right, you guys.
Thank you.
Elvan, thank you so much. It was a lot of
My
fun.
pleasure.
We did
Yes.
good, I think.
We had a great time. Thank you, everyone.
Listeners, hope you enjoyed it and hope you join us next time. Again, as always, if you have any feedback or suggestions, believe it or not, we really would like to hear from you. It would be fascinating to understand whether there are topics that we could talk about that you're really interested in, that you think are topical in the moment. We can't know everything. So if you do bring us a subject or a topic that you're curious about, we're probably just as curious. So more than happy to spark a discussion and see where we go. All right. Until then, we'll see you next time. Elvan,
Thank you.
Take care.